Public official Adolf Valfrey could be described as a vengeful and vindictive bully. My family and I are in the housing development and management business in Tucson, Arizona. In September 2000, Adolf Valfrey unlawfully threw around his weight as the then City of Tucson Section 8 housing administrator outside of the scope of city housing issues. He specifically engaged in the premeditation and strategy with City of Tucson Assistant Attorney Julian Hughes and the then Section 8 housing program manager Peggy Morales to retaliate against us. He particularly retaliated against my father, Frank Konarski, for having won a no probable cause police brutality case involving the City of Tucson. Adolf Valfrey did this by denying us access to rent to Section 8 housing tenants on an unlawful pretext basis. Adolf Valfrey's unlawful conduct is clearly outlined in a series of emails that he wrote to Julian Hughes and Peggy Morales. These emails shed light on the outrageous scheme of misusing the Section 8 housing program as part of a retaliatory vehicle against my dad, Frank Konarski. In one of these emails, Adolf Valfrey writes, "I request that we increase our efforts to find a legal or administrative legal action to terminate him from the program." What's clearly disturbing in this statement is that Adolf Valfrey still has to find a reason to terminate my dad from the program. Audaciously, Adolf Valfrey further writes, "What I don't want to do is to take an administrative action to bar him, and then not have the support legally to see this through to a positive resolution for the city. He has won one case against the city, and we dare not let him gain confidence, arrogance in the legal arena. Let me know when you have time to work with us in planning a strategy. Thanks." Instead of being the voice of reason, City of Tucson Assistant Attorney Julian Hughes responds to Adolf Valfrey's email by agreeing to strategize a retaliation. In her response email to Adolf Valfrey and Peggy Morales, Julian Hughes writes, "I have finished my motion on Shipke and should be able to devote more time to trying to find a way to justify the Section 8 Housing Department removing Mr. Konarski from consideration. When is it convenient for you and Peggy to get together to discuss this? Let me know. Julie." Going back to Adolf Valfrey's email, let's re-examine the statement. He has won one case against the city, and we dare not let him gain confidence/arrogance in the legal arena. An ethical attorney in this circumstance would likely advise her client to respect a legal ruling and discourage her client from engaging in retaliation. But in this instance, Julian Hughes made no attempt to discourage Adolf Valfrey from engaging in retaliation. Instead, she agreed to devote more time and city resources to figure out and strategize a way to justify the removal of my dad from participating in the Section 8 program as a housing provider. As a viewer of this video, you're probably wondering, what is Adolf Valfrey referring to when he says, "He has won one case against the city, and we dare not let him gain confidence/arrogance in the legal arena"? Adolf Valfrey is referring to a police brutality incident in which a court determined was completely unwarranted. Adolf Valfrey's morbid, retaliatory action was predicated upon our misfortune that my family and I were victims of a police brutality assault. On the morning of June 18th, 1997, I was helping my dad pick up trash and clean the parking lot of our small apartment complex that we own and manage. While we were working, my dad was suddenly ambushed by a police officer who grabbed my dad by the neck, lifting him up into the air and slamming him against a chain link fence. The police officer's stance and front chokehold were similar to these example video clips. Reading through the old witness statements, some of the witnesses stated that my dad was bum rushed, which means to suddenly force or barge one's way into. The police officer had his hands around my dad's throat and my dad was struggling to breathe. I was only 11 years old at the time. I was completely helpless and I was screaming for help. 1997 was a time before smartphones and camera phones. So I ran to my house, which was a few yards away from the parking lot, and grabbed the family camcorder. I was hoping that the police officer would see the camera and stop choking my dad.
Oh, oh my God.
Then help me bring her back. Help me.
Ambulance, breaking! Breaking! Call the ambulance! He has a heart condition, what?
You could clearly see one of the officers hunch over my dad and verbally taunt him. He's then tossed against the patio wall.
Patty, watch her. She ran to the house. She ran to the house.
No, she's gonna call the ambulance. He has a heart condition.
You better leave too before you go to jail. Now get out of here. You guys are making a big scene out of nothing.
Well, then why are you arresting him? He didn't do
It's none of
nothing.
your business why we were arresting him.
We're gonna take you to the hospital.
Are you Mr. Konoski's son?
Are you
One
yes.
of his sons?
Yeah,
What do you guys live? I know you live over here.
they live right there.
Go to your house.
Live right there.
Go to your house.
Settle down. Settle down.
Okay, go take your little video camera and go home.
Throughout this police brutality incident, you could clearly hear the police officers threaten to take me to jail for videotaping the incident. I was ordered by one of the officers to take my video camera and go home. In the following segment, you can see one of the officers gesture for me to leave the public sidewalk while other people standing without cameras are allowed to stay on the sidewalk. The officer also appears to shield and block my view of my dad.
I don't know. I don't know. They just kept on beating him up.
John, they choked him, John. John, they choked him like this. They choked him like this, and they choked him like that.
When I got home, a couple minutes later, a police officer came to our door and demanded the videotape from my camcorder. Throughout this whole police brutality ordeal, and through the booking process, my dad was paraded around and forced to endure verbal threats and ethnic slurs. When my dad was put in the police cruiser and driven from the scene, one of the police officers taunted him and said, "Now you're mine." That same officer made the following threat: "I'll put you in a hole that you'll never come out." My dad is a naturalized American citizen. He's originally from Poland and has an accent. Through an apparent jealous rage, the police officers introduced my dad to other officers at the booking station as a Czechoslovakian millionaire, adding that my dad owns apartments. This was an ignorant statement because my dad is originally from Poland. At the booking station, my dad was also called a fucking foreigner, and he was subjected to dehumanizing Polish jokes. He was called a Polak, which is an ethnic slur and derogatory reference to a person of Polish descent. As a side note, although it's not related to our police brutality incident, the Tucson City Council recently voted to fire a police officer who was caught on tape calling a motorist a stupid blank foreigner. During the video arraignment hearing at the city courthouse, the arraignment judge notified my family that my dad would not be released and instead placed in an immigration hold. One of the most shameful and discriminatory acts by city officials, which I believe was an attempt at damage control after the police brutality incident, was that they unlawfully placed my dad in this INS immigration detention hold for 2 days. My dad is a proud American who left his country of Poland for what he thought would be a better life. He had many jobs, accomplished many things, and worked hard his entire life. According to the Tucson Police Department's own documents, my dad never should have been arrested, much less the subject of an immigration hold. Why did the Tucson Police Department place an immigration hold against my dad, a naturalized American citizen who has been in this country for over 40 years, with a driver's license and a social security number? Could it have been because my dad has an accent, or because of his surname? Could it have been an attempt at damage control for the police brutality incident? One of the witnesses who observed the police brutality incident was Federico Robles, a middle school teacher.
And approximately 11 units showed up. They ended up taking Frank down and mistreating his sons, his daughter, and his wife. Frank is a hardworking individual. All he does is try to make this neighborhood cleaner and safer. The man is trying to bring up, this community, and all I can say, he's a hardworking individual. He's honest, and he definitely did not deserve to be treated the way he was. He was treated harshly, and a man like him didn't deserve it.
Peter Gelibert, owner of Direct Wall Systems, was another witness who observed the entire police brutality incident. In his written witness statement, he described the incident as one of the worst things he had ever seen, and the incident reminded him of the Rodney King police beating. My dad was charged with the bogus allegation of disorderly conduct. After several months, on August 13th, 1998, my dad had a preliminary hearing at the Tucson City Courthouse. Judge Robert Castillo presided over the case, and after reviewing the evidence, he concluded that my dad was arrested without probable cause and the case was dismissed. After all we went through, the city had the audacity to appeal Judge Castillo's ruling to the Pima County Superior Court. On January 4th, 1999, Superior Court Judge Richard Nichols affirmed the dismissal of the false charges and no probable cause ruling. Shortly after the dismissal of their false criminal case, the city of Tucson offered to settle our damages and losses from the police brutality incident in the amount of $15,000. However, my family declined the settlement offer because my dad's medical bills arising from this police brutality was over $20,000. My dad suffered his first heart attack shortly after this no probable cause police brutality incident. In 1999, my family and I filed a police brutality civil rights lawsuit in federal court against the city and several of its officers. Unfortunately, our case in federal court was dismissed for failure to prosecute by Judge Collins. Keep in mind that the case was not dismissed on the merits of the claims. Rather, our case was unfortunately dismissed on technical and procedural grounds. As a viewer of this video, you should now have a good background and understanding of what Adolf Valfrey was referring to when he stated in his retaliatory emails, "He has won one case against the city, and we dare not let him gain confidence/arrogance in the legal arena." Working with Julian Hughes and Peggy Morales, Adolf Valfrey retaliated by denying our access as housing providers to rent to Section 8 housing tenants. Adolf Valfrey also broke all of our existing leases and forced our existing Section 8 tenants to move. We filed complaints to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, their response was too little and too late. In 2001, Adolf Valfrey informed his city employee subordinates, including Peggy Morales, who succeeded Adolf Valfrey's position and maintained the culture of corruption, of the following HUD directive he received to reverse his decision to not permit Section 8 housing tenants to continue renting from us. HUD requires that I amend my decision to not renew existing contracts to allow anyone who is happy where they are to continue to remain in their current apartment. This HUD directive was of too little effect and too late. Our Section 8 housing tenants were forced to leave in droves, having already succumbed to the corrupt city officials' high-pressure tactics of forcing them to move under the threat of loss of their respective Section 8 housing monetary vouchers. In retaliation to our complaint to HUD and the subsequent HUD directive that was issued, Julian Hughes, Peggy Morales, and other officials engaged in what can only be described as an onslaught of harassment. Several city employees who are whistleblowers have come forward to inform my family and I of the unlawful retaliatory conduct by certain city officials. These whistleblowers describe how these officials have engaged in an ever-increasing, audacious expansion of corruption and other improper personal gain motivations to abuse the administration of Section 8 housing. One of these whistleblowers is Lee Ray Hanley, who is a City of Tucson inspector. He described the retaliatory conduct by city officials as a cancer on the city. In referencing the intensity of corruption and retaliation by city officials, another whistleblower named Robert Hendricks, who is also a city employee, stated, "Well, these city officials have a hard-on for you guys. They always taught, we want to put these guys out of business. We don't want them to have Section 8. In reference to conflicts of interest and attempts to abuse government power to obtain our rental properties for personal gain, whistleblower Lee Ray Hanley stated, and the city official's idea was that he was going to take the Konarskis' property. Whistleblower Robert Hendricks also stated, "I know that Rick and his father, who are current city officials, own a lot of rental properties. Maybe they were trying to get it. But as far as that, I just know that these city officials have a personal vendetta against the Konarskis." Former Tucson Section 8 housing program manager Peggy Morales engaged in various illegal acts to defy the HUD directive. Again, the HUD directive basically stated that any tenant who was happy at their current home should be allowed to stay and have their yearly Section 8 housing agreement and lease renewed if they should choose. One Section 8 housing tenant named Marina Duran, who was a tenant of ours for over 20 years, received a manipulated renewal HAP contract form. Written within the lines of Ms. Duran's address were the words, "Do not lease," in capital letters. When presented with a side-by-side comparison of the HAP contract renewal forms from previous years, Peggy Morales admitted in a deposition that she indeed manipulated the forms. Peggy Morales also admitted to manipulating a computer software management program called Yardi to display the text, "Do not lease," whenever our name or property address is accessed within the program. Again, these actions by Peggy Morales were in complete defiance of the directive issued by HUD. Peggy Morales also forced several of our Section 8 housing tenants to move out of their homes against their will. One of these tenants who was vocal and questioned Peggy Morales' illegal conduct and motives was Benita Baltazar. Benita Baltazar is a Section 8 tenant. Upon asking why she was being forced to move from the Konarskis' inspection-passed housing unit, Section 8 Administrator Peggy Morales made the audacious admission of a personal vendetta-driven administration of the Section 8 housing program towards the Konarskis. Benita Baltazar stated that it blew her away when she learned about the personal vendetta and had to move. Here is an excerpt of the deposition of Section 8 tenant Benita Baltazar describing how she learned about Peggy Morales' personal vendetta against the Konarskis.
Tell me when you met with Ms. Morales, where you were at, and who else was present when she used this phrase, personal vendetta.
We were at Section 8. I don't remember if it was her office or conference room, but I think, I can't remember her name, Margaret Lopez was there, but when Margaret Lopez walked out of the room and we were like, or saying our goodbyes, that's when she told me not to worry about it, and she told me that it was just a personal vendetta that her and Frank had,
All right.
Frank Sr.
So this was in the office of Ms. Morales or a conference room
Yes.
close to her office?
Yes,
So this was in the city office?
yes.
Okay. And other than the two of you, no one else was present when she actually used that phrase?
No, because Mom, I think her name is Martha Lopez, or she had just walked out. She had went to get me another voucher.
Okay.
She moved out. So when she was walking to go get the voucher, that's when Peggy Morales and we had shook hands. She told me not to worry, that it was just a personal vendetta that her and Frank had.
Did you move out of that place, out of that apartment?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Was it on your own choice?
No.
Right. So you would have stayed if you could have stayed.
Oh, yes.
Right. Let's look at some of the stuff that my co-counsel has been addressing. Do you recall Miss Peggy Morales writing to you, urging you to move out of the Konarskis' housing unit located on 519 West Dakota Street in Tucson, Arizona?
Yes.
Right. How did that make you feel when you saw that letter?
I felt
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I felt threatened, kind of, so I went in and I called legal aid at my reservation, and I asked to speak to someone who could actually help me, to understand it better and give me some type of advice, on how I can take care of the paper.
And that is your own personal feelings?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall Ms. Morales urging you to obtain a new housing voucher packet from her city housing office, even though you had a lease to rent from the Konarskis in
Yes.
2010?
Yes, sorry.
All right. Have you ever seen any housing rental lists or at the City of Tucson's housing office on which the Konarskis' names and/or their housing units were blocked or scratched out?
Yes, after the
Check the form.
After the whole city council thing, I went and got another housing list and rental list, and I seen it blocked out.
Okay. Were they scratched out with a pencil or pen, white out?
No, it looked like just like a black mark, like a marker, like blacked out.
All right. In your personal opinion, did you find it to be professional or unprofessional that Ms. Morales was so open with you on the reasons why she and Mr. Konarski were having some issues?
Form.
That just blew me, just blew me away because I just wanted to know why I had to move. You know, she didn't have to give me everything, which she didn't say much. She didn't say nothing really. She just said it like that. You know, there was just a personal vendetta between her and Frank.
Right.
Hello, my name is Bonita Baltazar. I am residing at 519 West Dakota. I have moved through the Section 8 there with me and my 3 children. I am a single mother. I feel this, I've lived in a lot of other places, and I finally found one that I feel comfortable and safe, and it's a very clean place. And as far as, excuse me, as far as everything is convenient for me there for my children, transportation, shopping centers, everything around, everything that I need is there. I was shocked when I got a letter from Peggy Morales stating that I had to move, and I have no way of moving at this time. I mean, no income, enough income to be moving. I also I was asked to see Peggy Morales. I want to go see her at the Section 8, and I asked her if there's any way she can let me know why I have to move. You know, since I am comfortable, I finally settled in, and she did tell me that she couldn't tell me because there was a personal vendetta between her and my landlord, Frank. And I feel that I feel that I should be able to stay because it's free choice of living, you know, and that falls under the Section 8 contract. And if it's free choice of living, why, you know, do I have to move? And then, you know, I'm sorry, I just, but I guess that's all I have to say. Sorry.
For everybody, thank you very much for being here and your input on the call of the audience. We're now going to move to the consent agenda.